Hey, everybody. In case you didn't know, every Thursday we do a little workshop of sorts over Zoom, and we call it the callback. If you're an actor and you want to hang out with other actors and find out how you can do better at acting, then come join us on Thursday. This last Thursday, we sat down with a dear friend of mine and someone who I've been in business with for the last decade, Forrest Powell, who works at Sweetwater, to get down to the brass tacks, the nuts and bolts about the kind of gear that you should have if you want to do specifically the voice acting thing. If 2020 taught us anything, it's like you better have some kind of decent gear at home in order to be able to meet producers' demands. And we talked about not only what you want to buy, what you don't want to buy, and what you can do at home to just get a decent sound. So this is a little clip from that. If you want to check out the full clip or the full video, then go to our Patreon, patreon.com/relator, and you can check out all of the videos that we've done in the past, not only for the callback, but also our writer's room, which is every Wednesday, and all sorts of other material. So if you want to get involved, go to patreon.com/relator, find out more. But for now, here's this clip. This is the first time I've ever seen Forrest's face. He has heard me many times. As a matter of fact, this is probably a pretty good setup. Forrest and I have worked with each other over a decade. I don't think there's a stick of gear that I've bought that I haven't purchased through him. Every audio interface, every microphone, everything but pretty much picks and strings has come from Forrest. And the reason why I've stuck with Forrest, he is someone who has an extensive knowledge. He's mixed records. He's engineered. He's done live sound. And the thing that I love about Sweetwater is that Sweetwater they have their own studio and they go in and they do, and you can speak to this more for us, but they will go, hey, so we've got this new mic and we just did this kind of recording on it. And this is what we learned about it. It's about an 8, but this is the price point. So if you're looking for a microphone that's an 8, that's at this price point, this is the one you could get. Not this one, but this one. And by the way, we also do carry this one. We just don't like it as much as this. So it's a really unbiased. Typically, you don't get an opportunity for someone who rates something to also be the person that is selling it to you. And I don't think I've told a single lie yet.
No.
Pretty honest.
I should mention right out front of it that the reason that I do everything professionally and otherwise is just, I think, the same fundamental reason. Like I think Patton Oswalt said that, at some point, I just want to be liked, I think that drives a lot of it. I like to talk to everybody, the same people. These are the same people I'm talking to every day, whether it's you where we have a very established rapport and relationship. And I know, I'd like to think I have an idea of what you want to do and what the ethos is. Like I don't have that with everybody, but if I want to maintain them as somebody that I do business with for a long time, like I need to, as a part of just being liked, not do anything that inherently screws them over or leads them down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's just not about a purchase or a thing. And sometimes there's some urgency to it. Sometimes it's 6 months out, but yeah, I've been at Sweetwater for 15 years as of this past Saturday. And it wouldn't be fun. It wouldn't be good unless it were talking to people like you all the time. And it wouldn't be something I could stay with. But to do that for any amount of time, there's gotta be the integrity to it. And I have to have some sense of what I'm talking about.
For sure. And the reason why I wanted you guys to talk to him is when we started doing this specific kind of class or course or whatever, you're going to get the philosophical, heady, more existential things. You're not necessarily going to get a lot of the brass tacks because audio is a passion of mine and it's a hobby, but we will hit the limits of my knowledge very quickly. So the reason why I wanted to bring in someone like Forrest is because a lot of you have very specific questions that are practical, logistical, and not everybody is like Ryan where, they've really invested in this and been able to get a kick-ass booth and a great mic and a good pre. Some people are like, I need to be able to give something that is functional, that is accessible, and that's going to yield a good product. And I can testify to the fact that, especially in quarantine, which we're coming out of now, so I don't want to establish that this is the way it's always going to be. There were games and shows that were done on Yetis and USB mics. So it's not always about the gear. I always say Nick Drake did Pink Moon on a 4-track recorder. It's not always Studio 2 at Abbey Road. That's the only place you can make a great record. You can do this on anything. It's always about the good content. But there is nothing more frustrating than your creativity being limited by the gear. So some of the things I want to talk about is what mistake I always love to ask you, like, what mistakes have you seen people make, specifically when this is not going to be a music product, but this is going to be something you guys you outfit, churches for their entire sound system, you do studios for their entire gear, and you also do a lot of VO. What mistakes have you seen people consistently make whenever they're making purchases and investing in a studio at home?
That's a really good question, because I think that's the first thing that everybody does is they make a bunch of mistakes, no matter what they're doing as a profession or a hobby. And I could probably start out by being just self-effacing and saying that most of the mistakes that I'm talking about, I've made the exact same ones. So it's just easier for me to rely on my own personal context and history and think, well, the stuff when I was in a band and I went to big box store, Mars Music, which is now out of business, but I'll
Oh my
name
God, that's what it was called. Mars
Music.
Music, dude.
But I was
Ugh.
like 17 and I wanted to be a frontman in a band, and I would ask them what is a compressor? And I mean, they wouldn't really know, but they would want to make sure that it was abundantly clear that they knew more than I did. So they would kind of give me this erroneous information. And the biggest mistake I made in that whole era, in that like between 16 and probably maybe 26, like it took me that long, I just wouldn't really research myself. And if I did, I would get overwhelmed really quickly. But even just finding like simple tenet stuff about audio is pretty straightforward. Like we even have like a dictionary thing on Sweetwater's site that I still go to as long as I've been there. I mean, I should have every little bit of incidental music gear knowledge in the world, having been there as long as I have, but I still have to kind of educate myself on stuff as I'm discussing it, as I'm picking it up. So I don't know, just the DIY function, like it's some people are afraid of that. They're afraid of educating themselves, of just, man, you and I could have a conversation about like your first USB mic for 3 hours. I mean, we could talk about all of the options, but sometimes just getting like the Elgato one or getting like an AT2020 USB, or just getting something and plugging it in for the first time and just recording something that is better than, like the Hewlett Packard built-in mic or whatever. Sometimes that's totally viable and worth the $100 to spend toward that, just to get that experience, because there's just no substitute whatsoever for just doing it yourself. And that's true. I mean, that's true of me even now, as much as I've spent time helping other people along their way. When I'm doing my own musical stuff, I have to go through that progress and that pace, and it has to be kind of my own creative space and experience. Because man, you could tell me 100 stories about, all this passion and life and endeavor you've put into your career, but until I've done anything that resembles that, I can't really understand it. It can't resonate with me in the same way. And even if it is just that day one hitting record on something, God, like for every one of us, that's so substantial. That's so meaningful to just be able to do it.
Right. Do you agree with the statement that in order to in order to get something good, you have to pay for it? Like, is it always about, you can't spend X amount without and expect to get this result? You have to spend this much to get this result, or have you found ways around that?
I think that as a commission salesperson, like my whole income is based on, we buy something for $1 and we sell it for $2, right? I mean, that's just the way that sales works. But I do that and I do just fine. And I absolutely don't believe that there's a direct correlation between the amount of dollars spent on a piece of equipment and the quality at the end of the process. And you mentioned, Pink Moon. I mean, that's an incredible album by any standard in the world.
Standard.
It's beautiful. And I could listen to it on MP3 at like the lowest bitrate and still be moved by it.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, you can, like, let's say Bon Iver, Justin Vernon, he recorded almost that entire For Emma Forever Ago album
on a 4-track, like a Fostex 4-track, right?
On a shitty 4-track, on a bad 4-track with
No,
like
this is our vibe.
it totally doesn't matter. And at the same time, I took home, I mean, we're talking about mistakes. I took home one of those Neumann Model D, like $10,000 or $15,000 microphones, and I made it sound like trash, and not on purpose. Like I was thinking this was the mic that they recorded like the big, crashing metal sounds for Terminator 2. This is like there's no budget microphone. It's going to be awesome. It's going to make my music sound like it's really good. And it totally didn't at all. It sounded like trash because I didn't know anything about how to use it. And I had like a preamp that didn't match well with it, and it was super brash. I mean, I
So
think
that right there is a critical component. You can have somebody else. There's a beautiful, beautiful. I say beautiful. It's beautifully ironic picture of I want to. It's not a 251, but it's some kind of like it's an original C1 or whatever. It's just a ridiculous. If you can find it, it's like you wrangled a unicorn, and it also still cost you 50 grand. Ridiculous mic, and they were facing the wrong way. And it's like it doesn't matter what you have. And in some cases, you can have this amazing mythical microphone that you're going to go through a Scarlett or old 002 or whatever that just does not complement that well. And it's actually this is really made for certain mics were made for certain pre's. Like back in the day, you had, I mean, you could probably get into this way more, but like all of the plugins and software and everything is all modeled after somebody sitting down. The Fairchild is a perfect example of this. And you guys don't know what this piece of gear is. It's amazing. I think there's maybe 10 or 20 in LA, period. But this original thing, the Fairchild 660, Capitol Records has one, and there's so many screws and so many tubes and so many transistors in this thing that it's damn near impossible to replicate, but people sure have tried. A friend of mine has one. But that is not going to be, no matter what, especially for actors, that Fairchild or that microphone, that C1, that amazing pre is not going to help you understand the script or direction or the character. It doesn't. And like I said, I saw games and shows being done for the last year in the bathroom of a hallway on a USB mic.
And I think
So
that's
it's
why
always about that.
the emotional, really, really high quality, like artistic content that occurs to us that hits our ears, it's not all from the radio, and it's not all from just blockbuster movies.
And do
Um,
you believe it's important then to get the mic that you can get or get the gear that you can get, or is it is there a potential of throwing good money after bad?
Immediately, if not sooner, is the answer of anybody that wants to start. And I mean, and I don't say that entirely to be facetious. I think that just something to be able to create is better than nothing. But I mean, I could say almost anybody, including like myself when I was 16, could get $100 together to buy just a USB mic. And there weren't USB mics back then. I had to get like the old first gen M box
Yeah.
and like whatever, an SM58. And it was probably like 300 back then, but it's even cheaper now. So like that's even less of an excuse for anybody pushing off doing it. But there are so many people that I talk to that are worried about the budget portion of it. And I think you could save up, and you could, and if that's the idea is they want to just get the right stuff the first time. I was talking to a guy about like the difference between like jumpers cables and like HOSA, and not to impugn the inexpensive cables, but one of the guys that was a rep was in a meeting the other day with us, and he was like, save yourself the money and buy the more expensive one. And he was just saying like, you don't have to buy it 3 times. You don't buy the crappy cable and then the middle of the road cable and then the good cable, because you've spent at that point all of the money. But
Right.
I think, I would love to have started out on like, an Apollo X8P or like or whatever Apogee converters, but I don't even know that I would have appreciated it. Just like with that Neumann Model D mic, like my ears weren't there to recognize the difference anyway. So for most people, I think it's about getting something in place. I mean, like you said, like 99% of the content out there is being recorded. Like everything on Netflix is in like that Apogee hype mic. And they bought like 1 million of them and they sent out to voiceover artists everywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's not kind of like an obvious testament to, the criteria of audio gear and where that balance lies, I really do think people should just get something to record, get something to make, music with or to record themselves with, and then the rest of it they'll figure out.
How important would you, if you had to prioritize, gear space or space gear? Like, which to you is more important? Is it more important to have to invest in the space, whether it be treatment, or is it more important to invest in the gear? Like, which will help overcome the other better?
It's like vital organs at that point, because the
Lungs or heart?
yeah, the room is it's and lungs. I mean, the room is the lungs of the acoustic environment. Like right now, I'm actually having these guitars hung. If I ever want to mix anything in here, is a terrible idea because I
Terrible.
can do them right now.
I,
But
I do the same exact thing, and I always wonder whenever I listen back to monitors, it's like, where's that like 500 hertz hum? Oh, it's coming from the body of my 3 acoustics that are on the wall. Dumbass.
and I mean, the room is a big instrument. It's just it's like having an acoustic guitar and you're making music inside of the body of an acoustic guitar. And that's true of every room that there is. Like they're basically reflective surfaces, and sound is in this room and it's moving and hitting that wall and coming to my ears from every direction. And if the more reflections there are, I guess the more smear and the less accurate it's going to be. So some sort of acoustic treatment. Actually, this stuff on the wall is just like one of those Prime Acoustic London kits. And I don't do a lot. Like I don't do a lot of mixing down here. I just put ideas together down here.
Same.
But even having that stuff on the wall, just the like 1-inch foam, 1.5-inch foam, it's like a $200 purchase, and it makes a huge difference. So you can still do that part of it pretty cheap too. Dave Pensado's doing a thing right now where as much as he had said like he was never going to record, work at home. We're in 2021 now. Like that's
Right.
just kind of the name of the game. And he's even kind of doing that same sort of thing where he's figuring out a less than perfect environment for mixing in, like not a $2 million studio, but making those decisions and also appealing to his audience, guys like me and guys like you and guys like, like 90% of my customers that have to do it, within their means, but they want to get started and they want, to do the next Nirvana album, because all of that really good content comes from those spaces of where they're forced to make these kind of decisions on how they prioritize what resources they have.
Well,
So,
let's pin that real quick because I want to talk about the dispelling the myths and simplifying, demystifying acoustic treatment, because a lot of people, and even I at one point was like, well, you just go into a closet and your clothes help, and then throw a blanket and then pillows, and then if you can put your dog and tell him to shut up, anything that can just be there to absorb sound, that's what you want. The more, and I had one booth, my very first booth was wall to wall foam and all egg crate foam. And it started sounding weird. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Define acoustic treatment and what that really means.
yeah. And I mean, there are big QRDs, like these quadratic residue diffusers that you see like on the Skywalker studios,
So
where they're
dope.
like the big block wood panels that have all the different blocks, and it looks really like geographically, aesthetically pleasing. And like the vast majority of musicians have no idea what they're doing, but they're just creating diffusion. So when sound hits it, it bounces off at all these very, very certain mathematical reflections, and the points scatter the sound so that it sounds like a much bigger open space. And that's like one type of room treatment. The most common stuff for like home studio people is just absorption, because we have, almost all of us have 4 walls, and 4 walls is like the enemy of good acoustics, because it's usually 4 very evenly spaced walls. Like we're either in a rectangle or a square, and even ceilings and like the math on even numbers is really bad for acoustics, because it accumulates and it builds up frequencies, and you get either feedback or you get these like big EQ bumps in like you said, like at 500 hertz or 500 megahertz, whichever it was. I think it was 500 hertz.
Yeah,
But it's
500 hertz is about the womb that I hear. Yeah.
woofy sound. But a lot of that stuff too, for like a room like this, is in the most like dramatic space, like 3K, where it's just reflecting right where your ears are most sensitive, and it just ruins the articulation. But even just, I mean, it's, you kind of hit it on the head where like there are a bunch of shirts and stuff and coats in a closet. Like that is almost better than most
Nothing.
rooms right there. So,
But it's also making sure that, and what I had to learn was that there's not one fix. There's not, like you said, there's not this $10,000 mic, or there's not this, $20,000 pre, or it's not about having the same acoustic treatment that they have at Skywalker. It's about what mic do you have? What mic pre do you have? What space do you have? What does your voice sound like? Male, female, that could potentially be two different mics at a certain price point. If you're a female, you may want to be on an 87, depending upon the model. But if you're a male, that 103, that Neumann 103 is going to be great. There's some, or AT414 is the one that I don't want to put that on a woman because it resonates at a higher frequency. So where the sibilance lies, where your S's are, is very critical, because you could buy this incredibly expensive mic and it actually is not the one that you should be using for your voice. Bono has always used an SM7, a $350 mic, and he records not in the big, huge vocal room or the big tracking room. He records in the actual control room, the actual studio of the studio. Because that's
Billie Eilish's stuff was into like straight into the interface in like their living room of the house they grew up in, just into a 414 or something like that, or an MD4, some weird microphone that isn't usually used as a handheld mic, like a large diaphragm condenser. And it's just, yeah, I mean, that it just all kind of circles that point of just the heart of it, and like, or just the desire to create something is so much bigger of a piece of the pie. And there are things that might not work so well. Microphones that might not lend themselves to a certain performance or space, or more narrow, type of formant of vocal.
Yeah.
But the acoustics are pretty important, because then it just doubles down if anything is screwed up. Like I learned, not like I should have known this 15 years ago, but I learned just like within the last 5 or 6 years, that like low frequency waves, so the bass in a mix. This room is like maybe 15 feet by like 12 feet, it's a small room. But a low frequency wave, and I'm talking like 100 hertz. So like, subwoofer kick kind of thing, where you feel it in your chest and your toes if you're listening to some hip hop or something like that. Or like if watching a movie, those waves are physically like 11 feet long. So if you're in a room and these are 8-inch like DSM2s. If I'm listening to this content right here, this is why you see those big studios with like, mid-field monitors that are 10 feet away, because those low frequency waves are just having propagated. And
wow.
Then, the point about like the acoustic treatment, if you can even just kill all of the reflections in a space for mixing or for recording, it's kind of better to do that than just to leave it bare.
So, 11 feet. That's crazy.
If you take and if anybody out there is ever recording like, drums, you take just a microphone, a ribbon or something like that, put it 10 feet in front of the kick drum, it will never sound bigger because of that.
No way.
And it naturally kind of kills all the high frequency stuff too. So there's, the Wes Dooley, the guy that founded and owns AEA, a super, super cool guy. He kind of told me a while back, they had this kind of, like a marketing thing, but he came up with the idea he called it fix it in the mic instead of the classic fix it in the mix, which is a cuss now. But the fix it in the mic thing was funny, because it's just moving things around and placing it and seeing how it sounds. Like if I have this mic right here and it's this far away, it's going to sound like crap. But even just moving it a little bit closer, like it'll be better.
Sure. So. I trying to make sure that I have a tendency to want to come up, because I even have conversations. Like the first time that Forrest first jumped on the call, I was like, oh dude, I need to talk to you about this, because I've this thing. Like you see this mic right here, that's a Warm Audio 251 that Forrest got me hip to, and I was like, dude, is this any good? And he was like, it's not a $25,000 mic that it's cloned after, but it's a lot of fun if you want to have it at home. Check it out. The mic that's in my booth right there, that came from Forrest. The other mic that's over there, that came from Forrest. This is the only mic that was given to me by Elgato, and Elgato was like, dude, check this out. This is a great mic for podcasting.